All right, let's get started. We have a very fast-paced webinar today. It's going to be about a half hour. We may go over just a few minutes with Q&A, depending on how long those questions go. But we're very excited for this presentation. How are you doing today, John?
I'm doing well. Thanks for doing this.
So we have a big audience today. This is one of the bigger webinars I've been part of. And thank you all for attending. Your investors are here, John, customers, fans, and your biggest supporters. And that has to feel great. Since we also have a lot of new people with us, would you mind running through a quick refresh on what AllSides is all about?
Sure. At the very core level, there's a worldwide crisis of credibility. We don't know what to believe anymore, or we don't believe things are necessarily true or not entirely true. And this is from generative AI, but also algorithms and social divides, toxic business models, all this partisan politics that we're hearing a lot of now. We're going to hear a lot more in the next few months. And that really is kind of leaving us in a bit of a chaos. What AllSides really does is we developed a platform of technologies that really combat this chaos. We combat the bias and misinformation and that social division so that we can better understand the world and each other. We do that in a couple of different ways. One is really about balanced information. So you don't just hear one side or the other, but you hear the different sides so you can decide for yourself. But just as important is also, if you will, balanced relationship or connection and dialogue. Because if we don't actually talk with each other or don't talk with people outside our little bubble where we're all 100% correct and believe things that we believe and other people may not, when we get out of that, then we actually truly listen to understand and can actually solve problems. And it's really the two together, that information and that relationship, if you will, or data and relationship or knowledge and connection. It's really that combination that's the magic that's necessary for really combating misinformation, really combating bias, really getting to a place where we can understand the world better. And with that, we can solve problems.
It's interesting, John. It sounds like the core competency of AllSides is applying technology to social issues. Can you tell me a little bit more about the dialogue solutions you're working on?
Yeah, that's something you don't see as much in AllSides right now, but it's a really big part of where we're going and where we're going to be adding to it. There's this old world where you went to the Oracle and it told you what to think and how to behave. And right now that's happening a lot in society where that Oracle may be AI or maybe some technology group or maybe your partisan group manipulating your friends to all think the same way. And that's really dividing us and breaking us down and creating this havoc. To get past that, not only do we need to give you that information, different pieces of information so you can really decide for yourself, but we also have to have an understanding of other people's humanity. So we've actually done a lot of these different types of dialogues and even very, very well defined conversation guides, where I like to describe it as you accidentally discover the humanity of the other person. And this is actually through our partner Living Room Conversations. It's really perfected this over years using mediation and other expertise in it. But when that happens, we suddenly actually hear the other person. Don't just listen to say why they're wrong, but hear it. And it's really that balance, that combination really of both that listening and connection and information where things really change.
It's really interesting, John. I love what you're doing at AllSides. Can you share more on the AI side of the business? I know that's a hot topic for everyone.
Yeah, and it's a big part of what we've been doing, not just since ChatGPT, but before. We were experimenting with AI for a long time and didn't really get good enough to be useful until recently. Now, there are two different approaches to AI. There's that evil thing, if you will, where AI tells you what to think, or it comes up or manipulates you. There's also, you can use AI to help us and enable us to understand more things more quickly, to kind of be empowering us and helping us. So that's how we're using it. So we're using AI to more quickly look at a lot of conversations or a lot of different perspectives to summarize it for you so you can see it at different perspectives more quickly. And that really can be used to help us see all the different perspectives, not just the really loud, let's go as far extreme right, or really loud, let's just go as far extreme left as possible because they want to be sensationalist and noisy, but also the academics or the more thoughtful people thinking about the problems who may lean this way or that way, or may have a completely different perspective, a libertarian perspective, or a different kind of perspective altogether, or an anti-establishment or a systems approach. with AI, we can identify those different ideas, those different policies, different information and data and perspectives, and provide that to you. And we can do that for about any topic. So that's where we're really going. So we can be all sides about it for about anything. And with that, AI can help us get there more quickly.
Can you share more about the bias checker that you've recently announced?
Yeah, that uses some AI. Now, the thing is that anybody can create technology where you throw in an article and it says, this is left or right or whatever. We can do that. Any AI can do that. The problem is that what is the standard? What is the bias? So we have a very different approach to bias than other folks. So when we start with bias, the first thing we focus on to rate a source is to come up with a system where it's not my bias. It's not John Gable's bias. It's not some panel of experts that AllSides chose. What we really do is just define a system so we get an idea of the average opinion of everybody in the US, what they would think that bias is. So what we do is we actually have these very thorough surveys where we get people like you and a lot of people across the political spectrum, across the nation, rural, urban, younger, older, socioeconomic, and lots of other kinds of differences. There's a lot of diversity in our groups. And we show them content from one source without telling them what that source is. And then we show them content from another source without telling them who that is, and do that many times. And then we ask you, well, do you think that's a little bit left or a little center or a little right? What do you think about that content? And at the end of that, we can basically reveal to you the average judgment of everybody in the US if they had a chance to look at that content as well to evaluate it. So our standard is essentially the average judgment. Now, the tricky thing is, how do you do that quickly? How do you do that instantaneously for like a new article somebody just wrote the other day? So we've been working with AI and training our AI with our own patented technologies and methodology and results so that we can calibrate it so that quickly we can give a very fast estimate about an individual article, what, if everybody in the US looked at it, what they think it would be, what they felt it's a little bit left or right. And that's one of the ways that we can use AI to enable you to understand more as opposed to telling you what to think.
And you're really leading the way with bias and implementing these latest and greatest technology. I think that's extremely impressive, John. Before we get to the questions, there's quite a few questions here lining up. I did want to ask you, you do have a funding round open. Looks like you have a tremendous support from your most passionate users. How is that going and how do you feel about it so far?
It's been really fun. It's fun to get this kind of support from people you don't know. So there are over 300 people I've never met before who are investing in AllSides before now, and that wasn't true before a WeFunder. And it's not just about the money, though the money is important for us to be able to resource and build this company. But it's also kind of part of what AllSides is about. We don't want to be another news organization controlled by this huge media entity or this huge corporation or this huge nonprofit funding, because nonprofit funding also has their own agendas. We really want it to be free of that. So the more people become part of investors of AllSides, the easier it is to be free of those toxic sometimes influences and really deliver what we want to do. So it's been both gratifying internally, but it's also really supports our mission about who we are.
It's really tremendous what we've seen so far. The comments from those that invested are phenomenal. Some of the best I've seen in the industry, and that also has to feel amazing, John. It's very impressive. Before we run out of time, I did want to ask you one more question from my side, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. What are your thoughts on the upcoming election?
Well, it's going to be kind of a wild ride. And I don't think it's going to be the same ride as it was 4 years ago. A lot of people think it's going to be a similar ride. I think it's going to be different. There are a lot of new challenges to it. And I'm just not talking about the Trump court case or the Biden going into court now, but also the technology is different, the AI, generative AI, the dangers of it. And people are getting more locked in. I think we're more aware now today than as a society than we were 4 years ago about how groups and partisan groups or media on different sides or even friends and organizations try to manipulate us to vote one way or the other. And one thing I'm excited about is that people are getting tired of that. They're pushing against that. They're kind of fed up with this. Now, the media is going to stay there. They're going to stay on reporting the sensational extremes and getting sucked into their agenda or the others. But there's a real beginning of a we've had enough, damn it, point of view out there. And that's great for us because we think that will bring you a better society. And that's what AllSides is enabling. But I think it's also going to change the tenor of this election. There's going to be more of a there they go again reaction to both sides just going crazy, which is going to happen a lot during this election. And I think that's healthy because at the end of the day, what saves our democratic system are our people, not these different groups. And so I think it's kind of good that our people are kind of disgusted with the situation because in a lot of ways, there's a lot to be disgusted with.
You have your thumb on the entire pulse of all sides of this media and what's happening with these individuals. And that has to be really insightful for you, John. Kind of before we jump into the final step of the questions, I did want to give you one chance. Some people aren't going to hang around for the Q&A. Do you want to let people know how they can learn about investing in AllSides, where they can go? And then we'll turn it back to the Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people know, but wefunder.com/allsides is the easiest place to go. You'll see videos there and lots of information. And come to our site as well. And give us comments at wefunder at AllSides. We read these, we learn these. We're still building new things and we're still creating and growing. And that kind of feedback really means a lot to us.
Thanks, John. All right, first question in from Mark Gorman. He's asking, so you've got news and entertainment. How do you tell the difference?
I'll tell you just 2 days ago, yesterday, I'm not sure. I decided to watch some TV news for a bit. And I went to a Fox opinion show. I was like, well, that's propaganda. And got a little tired. And then I went to a CNN show, and that was opposite propaganda. They're talking about completely opposite things. And then I actually turned to the Comedy Central, Jon Stewart, who's a Democrat, left, interviewing a Republican, former Republican congressman, and I actually found that conversation to be actually more insightful than I heard from either of the other places. And that's supposed to be a comedy show, and it is, and but it's interesting. I think at the end of the day, when we as individuals are looking at news, if you're being challenged with an idea you didn't have and you find it interesting and not just like proof that you were right and they were wrong all along, if you're being challenged and getting good arguments or opposite of what you're thinking, if that's part of the mix, it's probably good. If you're only hearing stuff you're like, hell yeah, all the time, you probably need to get out of that bubble. And even if you're laughing at it, and particularly actually sometimes if you're just laughing at it because it's in your bubble, that's sometimes more dangerous because that kind of gets us emotionally a little bit blinder. So if you're too happy and too excited, you may want to change the channel.
That's a great answer. We have a quick one from Cheryl Graves. She says, just wanting to send a note of appreciation to John and the full AllSides team for your important work. Thank you in all caps.
You got to share that with the team. We really work our butts off here. So this is very gratifying to hear, gratifying for you all to see and all that, but it means more to us than you might think. We're a small team. We're working our butts off. And I actually do share those things with the rest of the team, just so they know that, what we're doing is more than just a company, but it's valuable to society. And that's a lot of what gets us up in the morning. So thanks, Cheryl. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Cheryl. From Michael Reed, you'd like to know, what methods are you investigating to communicate the credibility of AllSides to what might be skeptical audiences who he feels need it most?
Yeah, the most effective thing we found was actually just the way AllSides does things. So early on, teachers discovered AllSides, and they were having difficulty actually talking about news in schools because they would get attacked by the faculty, administration, other teachers, parents, that they were being biased in one way or the other. But because we were so obviously showing left, center, right of the different articles, that they immediately said, we can use this in schools. We can start talking about issues in a way and not get in trouble. And I'll tell you, the most incestuous group on the planet are school librarians. They discovered AllSides, and they told every other school librarian as far as and before we knew it, we were being used in all 50 states around the nation. But I think that is an example of how it works. And we just have to keep doing that, and also doing something that other media doesn't do. When we make a mistake, just come out and say it. We do our best to kind of show you these different sides, to give you the different perspectives. And it's hard work and it's valuable work. And we're talking with people. It's not just us, it's people coming back and forth. But I think once you have that credibility, once you show it on a day-to-day basis, and once you also admit when you screw up, I think that's kind of leads to credibility. And that's what you don't see very much now, but that's what we're devoted to doing.
That's fantastic. We've got a question from Harriet Allen. How do you actually determine the bias of a news source, John?
Yeah, that's that system I was describing earlier. It's not us determining it so much as a system where average people determine their rating. That's the key. We don't want the standard to be what a group of my friends or some expert self-appointed group thinks. We really have these very what we call blind bias surveys. So we survey a lot of people to look at the content and they say, on average, I think it's left, center, right. And then we have everybody around the country doing that same thing. And then we give you the average. And then our technology, our systems internally, even our internal panels, because we do have experts looking at this, we train ourselves based on what average Americans are saying about this kind of content. So we're always working that. And even internally in our company, we are politically diverse. Our three co-founders represent lean right, left, and center. Every time we have a group that looks at rates bias, we have an equal number of people on left, right, and center looking at that content. So we do a lot of technologies, a lot of behind the scenes things that support that. And the final thing, which actually I'm most proud of, is that our audience. Last time we did a survey, we had an equal percentage Republicans and Democrats, 20% each, with independents and everything else being the rest of the group. So we also have a very balanced audience, which keeps us true to our mission.
Here's a wild one. James Paisano, I believe. He would like to know if you can detail the biases that are similar between Fox News over NPR.
It's interesting, and things have changed over time. And when you think about Fox News, there's also the Fox News hour versus all the opinion pieces. So Fox was generally more than NPR in terms of sensationalism. They were TV, and TV wants more emotive, but NPR is still a little bit more of that. The thing that's most similar, and that tends to be a TV versus written world. When the more TV oriented you are, the more sensational you tend to be, although a lot of the online content now is crazy. What was interesting is that like the news team at Fox trying to do solid news and the NPR team, there's a very similar bias here, where it's kind of like confirmation bias within your own tribe. So NPR for a long time was very respected for being a very, true news, trying to show different sides. And there was a kind of a whistleblower piece, if you will, by a long-term editor writing on the Free Press about how that really changed over the last several years, where they were now kind of like not covering things that would support possibly getting somebody else elected than they wanted to get elected. And that's really too bad. They lost. I mean, they were solid journalism, but their news was always on the lean left and their opinion was farther left. But we've seen in our own analysis of their content, and this article showed how they're becoming a little bit more tribal with an agenda, which is really unfortunate. I hope they find their way back. The Fox News, actually, their news team actually does really work hard on news, like solid news. They have people across the country working on that. Now, the opinion pieces throughout the day are much more sensational and inflammatory, but their news is pretty solid. But they're also in their kind of lean right bubble. So that's like trying to do news well in a lean right bubble, and NPR of the past trying to do news well, but in a lean left bubble, and then sometimes getting pulled a little outside of that. So there are lots of problems. If you're worried about those problems with ourselves, it's easy to point fingers to everybody else. We also have to think about ourselves. Get out whatever bubble you're in. Have a conversation with the other side.
It was a great way to balance kind of both sides there, John, just like you're committed to as a company, keeping things very organized and, representing, all perspectives. Can you share just a little bit on the insights you have for the founding team and how that all balances out?
It's really fun. Joan Blades, who is actually a co-founder of MoveOn.org, which became like a world-known very powerful lean left organization. It started during the Clinton impeachment trials and raised tens of millions or more, maybe hundreds of millions for the Democratic side. But she was an original co-founder of that, where she was hoping to get people to move beyond the impeachment and work to the business of the news. But she's definitely a Berkeley progressive. Liberal, I'd say, more than progressive. And I'm from Kentucky originally, small town Kentucky. Lean right, not hard right, but way back when, way back in the 80s, I worked in politics, so decades ago, and had kind of more of a lean right attitude. And then she and I did this TED Talk together. And it was actually invited by, it wasn't a TEDx, a full TED Talk. And it was in New Orleans, big crowd, big theater. And she and I worked on it really hard and had all these great points to it. And the main thing people got from it was like, wow, they really are friends. As if that was an unusual thing. It shouldn't be an unusual thing. And that kind of human connection across differences is really great. And it's what we have within the company. We have people, libertarian, far left, far right, very different kinds of differences, anti-establishment, more systems-based oriented. And it's normal for us to disagree and kind of understand what the other person's thinking. And to see that in action, often in Slack threads, we sometimes turn them into blogs just because we have a long discussion about one thing, or just in action live, is really fun. And when I say live, it's on Zoom because we're also, in order to keep ourselves diverse, we're consciously not in one location. We are all over the country, in rural America, in Texas and Florida and Kansas. I'm in San Francisco, DC, Virginia, all across the country. You'll see all these dots on our map on our site. So we don't get to see each other in person that much, but still we have that kind of amazing connection where we kind of appreciating each other with very different perspectives about things. And it's fun. It's much more fulfilling as a human than just talking to people I agree with all day long, frankly.
There's some interesting lessons to take from that for myself, just kind of to see what both perspectives coming together and what you've done together with that balance is really impressive, not just for AllSides, but something to consider in my own businesses, John. So really interesting insight there. Before we get to the final question, I want to remind everybody, thank you so much for attending. Also, if we didn't get a chance to get to your question, please be patient. The AllSides team is committed to going through every single question that came in now and any questions you ask after this webinar until the end of the campaign and into the future. So we're going to put that all together and deliver it in the next couple of days after the webinar ends. But don't hesitate to ask your questions. And again, I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of you. We wanted to keep this as tight as possible. Final question, John, from Nadine. Why should I invest in AllSides, and what makes AllSides different from other investment opportunities?
I think there are two things. One is a social good. We're not just trying to transform the world to make a bunch of money. We're trying to transform the world to make the world a better place. So we are very much at AllSides. When we think about what we're doing and why we're doing it, for us, financial and social success both are requirements for what we're thinking about. The second thing is we are really deep into solving a core problem that humanity is facing today. All of this misinformation and bias and social divisions are not just dividing us in politics and that's not, I shouldn't understate that. I mean, we're very concerned about the health of our democratic system, of our ability to self-govern. It's also a contributor to the loneliness and depression you see in society at a higher level than we have in my lifetime, particularly amongst kids, teenagers, particularly younger girls. This is all driven by this great massive division and filter bubbles of misinformation and bias and not thinking you can't talk to somebody who's different than you or being afraid to say what you think. This has much deeper problems. And it's all driven by the same thing. And what AllSides is doing is solving that core problem. So yes, it's very important in politics. It's also very important in about any industry you can think of. So when you think about that both as a social good, they also think of that as a financial opportunity. This has a potential of being that core solution for so many different industries that the financial opportunities are pretty humongous, we think.
Wonderful. Well, first, I want to thank everybody who took the time to attend the webinar. We know we're all busy out there, and taking the time out of your day to watch this is important to us and John and the AllSides team. And I want to thank you, John, for taking the time to sit down with me. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful day, John, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks a lot, Travis. That's great.